as you know, it's almost Halloween, so my kids had their Halloween parade at school, so I was trying to watch it virtually. And I saw my son, apparently could not get his costume on, so he was sort of walking there dejected in his civilian clothes. So I was like, that's just depressing. I feel bad. I'm going to have to find him a present on the way home or something.
Yeah, terrible dad. Really bad dad. Actually, I got my daughter in her costume last night. She's 5, and my wife was like, she's not going to be able to go to the bathroom in this thing. She's going to need help getting in and out. And I was like, well, her teacher can help. He's a man. And I don't know. My wife thought that would not be a thing. The male teacher would not be allowed to do a zipper or whatever. So there was some scrambling last night at our house, too.
I think your wife is a wise woman.
Yeah.
In some respects, at least.
Yeah, obviously she just has shown poor judgment in the past.
Right. Totally.
Well, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I hope I'll sell tens of thousands of books.
I mean, this is kind of bigger than Oprah, actually.
I know. Just, I'm at number 11 on the New York Times list is what they told me. So maybe this will push me into 10 so I can get published.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think I've sold about 17 books so far, mostly to my mother.
Oh, nice. Well, my mom listens to this, so let's get another mom involved. I'm always a little bit confused about your last name.
Dzubow.
When you just read someone's name and you just make a vague sound in your brain.
Yeah.
So what is it again? Sorry.
Dzubow.
Okay, Jason Dzubow. Now, you normally blog over at the Asylumist.
That's right.
Asylum and its discontents in the United States. Asylumist.com.
Correct.
And you've written a book.
So what did you write about? I'm just curious.
So basically, it's a collection of blog posts, which I updated. So really the intended audience, I guess, is pro bono lawyers, maybe non-pro bono lawyers who are new, law students, and asylum seekers who speak really, really good English.
Did you purposely go after the poorest possible audience for a book?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did. And I put the price point on the book maybe too high, but I'm like, well, okay, all profits will go to charity. So I expect to be profitable in about 2 to 3 years if I can sell maybe another 1,500 books. So we'll see. So I'm not getting ready to retire based on this.
All right. But make the case. I mean, why should people read the book other than trying to get you to turn a profit, which is also a good reason, but
it's a good reason.
Yeah.
It's not really about the law and asylum. It's more about practical issues that come up during an asylum case. And so for the last, 10, 12 years, I've been blogging about asylum. And I try to, as issues come up in my own practice and for my own clients, I've written about them. And so I kind of had all this material that was online, but not organized and not updated. So I decided I would take that, put it into some sort of format where people could actually find the subjects that are important to them and then update it so it's relevant to today. I mean, I updated it, earlier this year. So it's talks about, for example, the asylum office and the COVID pandemic and how has that affected asylum interviews, or there's how to write an affidavit, how to do a closing argument in court. So it's all about different aspects of asylum, how to organize exhibits. The idea is that it'll be hopefully helpful to, for experienced practitioners, probably less so, but for new practitioners, I think it provides some practical advice, hopefully in an easy to digest format. So that was sort of the impetus. And I just had all this, and people would write into the blog with questions as they do. And so I would have to say, okay, we'll go back and look at the post from January 6, 2016. And that was pretty tedious, I guess. So now they can just buy the book, which is hopefully what they'll do.
Very convenient.
What would you say is the biggest issue with asylum, the biggest bugaboo that you would want to emphasize?
To me, the biggest issue right now is the border, of course, and what's going on there. But, my book is not really directed for those asylum seekers. Many of them don't speak English down there. The book is really for people who are in the affirmative asylum system or in the defensive asylum system. So it's not necessarily going to be helpful to people who are trying to just get an interview through the metering system in Texas someplace. But, the border is affecting the asylum system, both at the immigration court and the asylum office through the backlog. It's using a lot of resources. The resistance to what's going on down there is so great, and it's so easy for people on the right or the restrictionist type people to take what's happening at the border, take the visual images, and use that to their political advantage to really rile people up against immigration. And I think that's affecting the dreamers, it's affecting the asylum seekers, it's affecting many millions of people who are here who potentially could benefit from some sort of a broad-based immigration reform.
I think that the right doesn't need those images to rile up fear and an idea of chaos. I mean, we saw this in 2013 when there was a bipartisan immigration reform that passed the Senate, and then it just died. And they didn't need caravans or whatever CNN to be covering people waiting across the river. They just needed good old-fashioned anti-immigrant Americanism or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that may be right.
I think at some point they just need to do it. The Democrats, it's going to be the Democrats, it seems, really just need to do it. And I think it would be something like the ACA, the Obamacare. Everyone was against it, but now, I mean, that's still a talking point, right, against Obamacare, but people are pretty satisfied with it. I mean, I think we had a broad-based immigration reform that was generous. I think you would get, a year or two out from it and people would see nothing has really changed. And that would be it. There would still be talking points against it, obviously. But I think the Democrats really need to get over themselves. And it's either one or two things. They're really scared of this backlash, or what I think is more likely is they like having it as something to stir the pot. They like that tension that it brings with fundraising and all that. So
I don't know if it means anything, but this reconciliation bill has had rumors of immigration reform or actual reforms that are pretty aggressive since the spring. And there's not a lot of pushback on that. Now, I think if it were to pass, then that would change. But let me ask you this, Jason. A lot of times when I see old practitioners like Matthew.
Yeah, me.
Who's still filling out his 765s on a typewriter, you see that they've developed...
I used
carbon copies.
I still use my quill pen.
Yeah. You notice they developed some bad habits in the early 90s, and they just never stopped with the bad habit. That's the idea behind a bad habit. What would you say are the top sort of pieces of advice for attorneys that you see that we're sort of screwing up when you're doing FOIAs and looking at other attorneys' work? What can we do better?
I think you guys are doing great, actually. I mean, I'm still using the carbon copies myself. But one thing I've seen, at least in Virginia where I practice, there was a debate going for a while about what should the affidavit look like. Like one practitioner just stopped using an affidavit. And for me, the affidavit is sort of the heart of the whole case. Like everything I do kind of compares to the affidavit in an asylum case. So, for example, I'm working on a case now from Bangladesh where there's multiple letters, multiple documents. So instead of comparing each document and each letter to every other document and every other letter, I just compare it to the affidavit to try to ensure consistency. Because that's the real killer in a lot of the cases that I see is inconsistencies, and I'll get them sometimes at the BIA. And, to sort of win a case where the applicant was denied or the respondent was denied because of credibility is very difficult. You really have to parse through all the different statements of the judge, compare it to the affidavit, compare it to the testimony, compare it to the evidence, and then try to come up with a winning argument. But of course, the BIA doesn't want to spend a lot of time reading all that. They just want to have like 2-3 sentences that kind of grab them and cause them to reverse the decision. And if you can't get their attention, it's very hard to win an appeal. So I think relatively detailed affidavit is good, using the active voice, not the passive voice. We saw here, I used to get a lot of cases that were referred from the asylum office, where you would see that everything's in the passive voice, so you have no idea who did what to whom. And what did Dorothy Parker say? I think the passive voice should not be used. And so I'm a proponent of Dorothy Parker in that and many other things.
Right.
Well, one thing that's frustrating is when you have an immigration judge who will find your client credible and say they corroborated, their claim, and then make a ruling where they basically don't believe your client. So that's always fun. But a quick thing with credibility, you'll find judges who can always, they nitpick. And that's why, right, the affidavit is so important. I just had a recent case denied where the judge found my client not credible because of a police report, where the police report actually said something, the way the police wrote it, that would have been really favorable to her claim, but that's just not what happened. So my client testified in her affidavit. She said in the police report, the police said X, Y, and Z. However, X, Y, and Z did not really happen. Now, X, Y, and Z would have been really good for her case, actually. But she was being truthful and honest on the stand. She testified yeah, I don't know why the police put that in there, but X, Y, and Z didn't happen. And cross-examination, of course, the classic cross-examination that just takes our direct questions and reframes them in cross. He went over it again, and she said, yeah, I don't know why they put that in there, but it didn't happen that way. The judge asked her. Then the judge found her not credible because this police report said something that she refuted. And it was obviously a judge who was looking for something, looking to nitpick. And so how do you best prepare your client for these contingencies when you're going to get someone who's going to be real nitpicky? Do you have any tricks? Do you hypnotize them?
We're seeing that a lot. I do a lot of Afghan cases, and all those are affirmative, and we're seeing at the asylum office. And you would expect that because we've evacuated tens of thousands of Afghans and sort of brought them here with no real status except for a temporary humanitarian parole, you would expect that they're kind of pushing these cases through pretty quickly. But what they're doing, so I had an Afghan case last week where the woman was very well known in Afghanistan. She was a movie maker. She's organized all sorts of events. She won lots of awards from the U.S. government. And we were there for 5 hours. And I'm like, why do we need to be here for 5 hours? This woman is known to the State Department. She's in the media a lot. She's a well-known person. But there was many questions about, did you ever give any money to terrorists? Did you ever go through a checkpoint? Did you ever give a penny to the terrorist? How about a glass of water? How about a flower? Did you ever do anything? Did you ever accidentally give anything to a terrorist? So all these very nitpicky questions where they're fishing for bars to asylum, and looking again, going through the affidavit very carefully to look for inconsistencies on a person who's just, everything in her life is public. And so it's just sort of a well-known case if they want to spend the time looking at the internet to see what she's all about and asking the State Department because the State Department has already given her an award. So what I'm telling them is you're going to have to be prepared to answer a lot of questions that seem nonsensical and that really sometimes are just dumb questions that just don't even apply. Like, can any element of the government of Afghanistan protect you from the Taliban? Well, no, the Taliban controls the whole country. Why are you even asking this? Why are we spending time on this? Is there anywhere you can live safely in the country? Again, no, the Taliban control the whole country. So I've been seeing this, and it's been a source of frustration because we had this week, I think, about 6 or 7 interviews for Afghan clients. Last week we had a couple. We had one in court. It was a 3 or 4 hour court case that my associate did on Monday, where the government attorney was trying in every way possible to find some sort of issue where this person had many pictures of himself with the president of Afghanistan because of his job. So, we're preparing the clients completely for these cases, even though, at the same time, the government is evacuating people and bringing them to our country. They're trying to, I guess, deport these people back to Afghanistan who are in either an immigration court or at the asylum office. So it's really weird. And so we're practicing 2 full practices with the clients, each client, and, really prepping them for all sorts of cross-examination questions.
Are you seeing a degree of aggressiveness in Afghan cases specifically that you're not seeing in other cases? Do you think there's some sort of directive to be above and beyond thorough, I guess, or something like that? I mean, what's going on?
I don't know. And in fact, I asked, there's a woman at the asylum office who's coordinating all the affirmative cases anyway. So she said, I have many Afghan cases. And she said, we're going to give you 30, 40 interviews coming up, which is an overwhelming amount of work, especially if you're preparing full cases, which of course we're doing. And so I said to her, well, what are you doing? Like, if you're expediting these cases, isn't the intention to just grant the cases? Well, we can't really say that. Well, what can you tell me then? Like, why can't you be transparent about what you're doing? And why would you not say that? Like, do you really want to deport someone to Afghanistan right now?
I mean, could it be that so much light is being shown right now? And again, from the right, especially, where there's such concern that maybe we've allowed terrorists into this country that they just want to be extra double Dutch sure that your client is not a terrorist. Do you think maybe that's a reaction to that right-wing talking point?
I mean, maybe. I do feel like, and this is sort of comes back to my concern about the border. I just feel like the right wing is winning on this. I feel like, Joe Biden is president, Democrats control the Congress. Like, maybe I'm just a pessimist. I mean, I am a pessimist. But I just feel like the other side is winning, even though the side that should be in favor of more liberal immigration policies is not making a lot of progress. I hope I'm wrong. But, it may be that that's what they're reacting to. My sense is that they're just on autopilot, that they just don't have the ability to sort of say, well, this case, this is a strong case. The person's been in the U.S. already for 5-6 years. So if she was planning on doing a terrorist attack, she would have done it by now. Or this person is in a photo next to Hillary Clinton. So presumably if they were going to do something bad, they would have done it when they were standing next to Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Is standing next to Hillary Clinton, isn't that bad enough?
I think that can be actually one of the bars actually under 208. So I do think there's that issue, but we're trying to work with that.
It's obviously possible to underprepare a client, right? They get in there deer in the headlights. They don't even know really what's going on or the purpose of the hearing. Of course, do you ever feel like maybe you've over-prepared? You can go over the declaration too many times. It can sound too memorized or too robotic if they're over-prepared.
Yeah, and actually one of my favorite things is when my laziness kind of is lined up with, the correct thing to do. So like if I can do less work
Right. Exactly.
and it's actually helpful to the case, that's one of my favorite parts of this job. But I do think so. I think, there's something to be said for, especially when a case involves emotion, which asylum cases often do. Like if you go over it again and again and again, it can drain the emotion out of what the person is saying. And there's obviously a balance because the whole process is so artificial. Like we create an affidavit with dates. Well, I got a threat letter on, June 3rd, 2006. Well, nobody can remember that. The only reason you remember that is because you sort of figured it out as best you could from whatever information you had available. You wrote it in your affidavit and then you memorized the date. So it's not a test of credibility. It's just a test of memory. And we sort of try to get that across to the clients in a way that's more easily understood by them, I guess. And so, I think like, it's not just that it's robotic. I think that people get very nervous and, they'll say the key to passing a test is being relaxed. I remember when I transferred from one university to Temple University, when I started at Temple, the counselor told us, just to sort of learn about all the different tests people take, I take the MCAT, I take the LSAT, I take, the GRE, whatever, all the different tests that they take. And he said, actually, I do very well because I don't care. I don't care what the results are. So I just go in, I'm completely relaxed, I take the test, and I do better than people who've been studying for weeks and months for these tests. So I think there's some of that to the asylum case too. You can over-prepare, make yourself just very nervous and start to get confused with all different dates and different events. And so I think, there's something to be said for trying to tell the story in a natural way. And one of the pluses is, maybe this is different than court, but at least in the asylum office, I don't think the officers are really trying to trick the applicants. I don't. I don't think they're asking trick questions. I mean, sometimes they're probing for credibility, and that's fine. But I have not seen a case that I can recall where an officer was deliberately trying to ask a trick question to trip up applicant and kind of create a credibility problem.
Of course, you're not talking about immigration court.
I'm not talking about immigration court because it's a different animal.
Yeah.
If you could make one change to the way we do asylum here, what would it be?
The change that I would make, if I could make one change, would be to eliminate the nexus requirement. I feel like I don't know why anyone should care if a person is being sent back to their country who's going to be harmed or killed. Do we really care if it's because they're Catholic or because just somebody doesn't like them and wants to kill them? I feel like if our country is sending people back to be harmed by, MS-13 because the person doesn't meet the nexus requirement, that's essentially as immoral as sending someone back because the government doesn't like their political opinion. And also, of course, like the nexus just creates so many issues for lawyers, for applicants, and it takes such an amount of time. Like it seems to me like the better determination would be, is this person going to be harmed or killed in their home country? If they are, we should allow them to stay here. And, of course, we have a positive view of these people, like even refugees who are brought here from refugee camps. There's been studies that show that they contribute positively to the economy. So, like, it's not like we're losing something by giving them the benefit of asylum. We're gaining something, which is a person who's going to contribute to our country.
So just for people who don't do asylum, maybe not practitioners, to kind of illustrate the nexus point, you can have a situation where a young man, say in Honduras, say 16 years old, is recruited to join the MS-13 and he refuses. And they say, listen, we're going to kill you for not joining the gang. And also, we're going to kill your mom if you don't join the gang. So mom takes child to the United States, and let's say they both apply for asylum separately. The child would lose because there's no nexus. Okay, we understand why they're going to kill you, but you don't belong to this particular social group. But mom, since you're a family member, you're going to win asylum. So hopefully you can apply before he turns 18 so he can be included on moms, or if he came by himself. So, we'll send him back to be killed, but mom will be protected. No, we should protect mom. But that's how kind of insane. And this does lead us to spending a whole lot of time thinking about how do we frame these arguments. And it really becomes, do we find the magic words or not in order to save our clients' lives?
That's right. Yeah. And, like we're three white men, but I like to say asylum was created by white men for white men. So, people who are victims of, let's say, non-public type harms like domestic violence, it's much more difficult for those people to win asylum. And we have case law that created this very difficult to navigate particular social group of Guatemalan women who are unable to leave the relationship. I mean, that's such a ridiculous. The woman's not being harmed because she can't leave the relationship. She's being harmed because, she's a woman. Why can't the particular social group in that case just be women? Or why can't we just protect women who are being harmed in instances of domestic violence? It's such a kind of a perverse exercise to come up with these particular social groups. And if three people agree, you, the lawyer for the applicant, or the applicant, the judge, and the DHS attorney, then it's a particular social group. That's really the only thing that determines a particular social group. I mean, I taught this stuff for 5 years, and the more I study it, the less I understand. I don't understand particular social group at all. It's very complicated and confusing and just so frustrating because it's just such a ridiculous exercise.
Right. Jason, what's the name of the book? We should get the name of the book.
I guess I should tell you that. So it's called The Asylumist, How to Seek Asylum in the United States and Keep Your Sanity.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It is available on Amazon. I will say that the and keep your sanity part is probably false advertising or bait and switch or something, but it's the best I could come up with.
You might have oversold that part, huh? Well, we really appreciate your time. I've got to jump.
I really appreciate it too. Thanks so much. It's good to see you guys. Good to talk to you.
Come back on the show.
Maybe one day we can have lunch together. Don't blow me off.
I will try to start saving money now.
All right.
Take care.